Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. My name is Zach Gardner. I'm the chief architect at Keyhole Software, or so they tell me. And I got a little bit of an adventure. I went on a little bit of a side quest, is what the kids call it these days. About 3 or 4 months ago, I wanted to talk with people in a lot of different industries and a lot of different disciplines. I wanted to see how they were using generative AI in both their personal life as well as their professional life. It was a topic that had come up at every single conference I had ever been to last year. And I wanted to have a really good, really well rounded perspective on what this crazy thing is. Well, thankfully, there were enough people that agreed to talk to me about their experiences in it so that I could not just wander around in the shadows like Plato's cave. I could actually have an insightful, well thought out, and a well rounded approach to generative AI. Today with me on the program is Michael Eaton, someone whom I saw at Dev Up last year. I think it was in St. Louis.
Oh, sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Small world, isn't it? So
hmm
Michael's a principal consultant. Michael, thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And of course, the views and opinions expressed in this program are the views and opinions of the participants and do not reflect their employers, any trade organizations they are affiliated with, any listservs that they are members of. There's just two dudes talking. We're just having a good time, just chatting. So for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet or hearing you at a conference, maybe give us a little bit of an introduction. Where do you live? Where do you work? Kind of what was your career journey? What was the first thing you remember programming? This is always a good one.
Interesting. Mike Eaton. I currently live in Ohio. My wife and I both were born and raised in Michigan. I was born in the UP, the Upper Peninsula, the part near I always say the better side of Canada, but lived there for a very short period of time while my dad was in the Air Force, and then but grew up in a small town in Michigan. My wife and I both we moved away at various times. Had kids, decided let's move back to that tiny little town, and then when our oldest, who is now 22, was getting ready to graduate high school, we said we're not going to be here because if you stay here, you're going nowhere, right? I was working
Mhm.
remotely. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, so but I wanted more for the kids. It was a great place for the kids to grow up, but so we put it out there as she was graduating. Hey, we can live anywhere we want in the entire U.S. Now I put some guardrails around it. Like there's something I needed to be close to an airport, things like that. Uh, so we all talked as a family. My son as well, who was still in high school, but he was doing online high school at the time, so he didn't care either. But we kind of kicked it around, and we wanted things to do, right? So we wanted to be near an airport, all these things. We didn't want to be too far from home because our parents obviously are older, and and um, and then bonus was let's be near friends. So you know honestly, Columbus bubbled right to the top of that list, mainly for the friends piece of it. But there's plenty to do down here. It's a big city. So in 2019, we moved here. At the time, who was I working for at the time? This was right before COVID. I was working for a company out of North Carolina. We were here about 6 months. COVID hit. Uh, Obviously, world shuts down. I got furloughed. So at the time, I took a little bit of time off. A couple places in between. I am currently working for Improving, which is they're a modern digital services company, software consulting, software dev, training, that kind of stuff. Uh, we have offices all over the U.S. I work out of the Columbus office. We have one in Cleveland as well. I love it. It gives me a good mix of kind of leadership opportunities and keeping the act sharp by working with some cool clients. Um, yeah, so man, getting that first step. I got my first computer when I was out of high school. I was probably 19, I think. So this was 92. Um, I was going to college and I needed something, right? I needed, couldn't just use a typewriter anymore. And I got turned on to programming pretty quickly. It's like I want to know how to make this machine work. So this was, days of Windows 3.1 and DOS.
Mhm.
And I just started like kind of using Quick Basic, QBasic first, and then Quick Basic to just build little utilities that ran in DOS that just made my life easier. just and so I could understand how they worked. I made a front end to the format command, those types of things. Um, and and then I just kind of got caught up in doing that. That's not my first choice. Software development was probably my third choice on the list, but it's the one that kind of took. Um, and yeah, so I've been doing it. I got my professionally, I've been working since '95, so I'm coming up on 30 years next year.
Mhm.
Kind of stayed in the Microsoft world most of it. Done some other things, some Python and those types of things, but most of it's been in the Microsoft world.
Mhm. Similar path to mine. I gotta ask though, what's your thought on pasties? Are you pro pasty? Are you anti pasty? Being a Youper, I'm curious if you have any strong opinions on that topic.
No, not really. I mean, I've had them. It's one of those things where I guess when you're so close to it, you don't really think about it. It's like the what's the thing down here? It's chili on top of spaghetti down here in Ohio, and I look at people going, "You're weird."
That's so
They probably
bizarre.
think the same thing when I talk about pasties and those types of things. But you know, I'll eat it if it's there. Been to a lot of festivals where they've had them. So,
I love me a good pasty. All right,
mhm.
generative AI. This isn't pasty talk. You gotta get the people what they want.
Right.
So you mentioned it earlier, when we last spoke, I think it was in December, you
Mhm.
had one set of opinions on generative
Yes.
AI. And then
Yes.
right before, in sort of the green room before this, you were saying that
Mhm.
your opinion has sort of evolved. So kind of talk
For
me
sure.
through like what's been your usage of it? How have you used it in your personal as well as professional life? And how has your thought process on it sort of grown as you've been using it?
Yeah, so back when we first talked, I was super skeptical, right? A big part of me was like, can I just retire before this all becomes a thing, right? For all this AI stuff hits, can I just retire? Like I didn't want anything to do with it. Um, and so I was really skeptical at the beginning. I didn't quite understand it. As a writer, I have a blog which I have not had a lot of time lately to dedicate to, but I do a lot of writing, and the way people were using it was a bit offensive to me. Um, but I think one of the people I work with, his name is Joe Brinkman. He had done an internal talk at Improving, kind of going over some things about Gen AI and some of the Copilot stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah, you're kind of convincing me. But I think the thing that did it is I started using GitHub Copilot. I just used
Mhm.
it for a couple of things, right? And it was again very tentative approach of like, okay, I don't quite know how I'm going to use this. I think some of the early usage was let's generate some sample data, right? I mean, give me
Mhm.
this, give me a record and give me a JSON structure in this format with this kind of data, and then tweak it, and then well, give me 1,000 of those, right? So I can have some sample data I can load into whatever I was loading it into. And I was like, okay, that was actually kind of cool. That saved me a lot of time because normally I would have probably dump something into a CSV and then you use Vim or Perl or something to like slice and dice it and give me my JSON. Um, so that was big at the beginning. Um, Around that same time, I was hearing a lot of events were saying, "Hey, as a conference, how do we handle people who submit abstracts that were written by Gen AI?" Because you can tell, right? To me, at least it's because a lot of the language that's used that comes out of these things, it's like that's not that person. That doesn't sound like that person. If I try to do it, hey, write me an abstract to do this, I really have to tweak it to make it be in my voice. But so big picture is I started using GitHub Copilot. I had switched my IDE to JetBrains Rider a few months ago. And because I was using VS Code and I had GitHub Copilot there, and it was like in Rider, I didn't have that. I had to actually submit to be part of their test program for it. But I got in, and then it was just I kept the pane open, and I started using it as a pairing partner. It's like, how do I do this? How do I do that? I would paste in sections of something, right? Whether it was a Docker file or it doesn't matter what. I'd paste things in saying, what's wrong with this? Or how can I do this better? Um, I haven't like let it generate lots of code, but I'll ask it questions and try to get to where I want to get, and then I'll write the code. I know a lot of people will just go whole hog and be like, generate it, hit the little button that shoots it over into your code editor and call it good. Um, so I've used it professionally for those types of things. A lot of it will be explain what this code does to me. or um, I'm trying to think of some other use cases I've used it for. Um, a lot of it is just that kind of thing, just to help, right? Just as someone else I can ask a question to, because sometimes I don't have the benefit of working with other consultants. Sometimes I'm on a gig by myself and I just have to figure it out. My wife recently made a comment that I talk to myself when I code. So I'll just be like up here by myself and just talking. And she's like, "You talking to me?" Nope, just talking to figure stuff out, right? And I kind of use it for that. It's like if I find myself like, okay, I'm not understanding this, I'll use it. I have used it. I wrote an abstract for a talk not long ago on learning and collaboration, and I pasted the abstract and I'm like, given this abstract, what are the high points I should hit,
Hmm.
right? Spit out an outline. I thought, okay, that outline's not terrible. Um, but it gave me some things to think about. And then what I would do, what I found is it would spit out like, a piece of the 10 things that it gave me. And I'd say drill into the third one more. Like I want more information on that one. Um, I just did the part of this learning and collaboration talk I did was talking about how do you build a good company culture? How do you build a good team
Hmm.
culture? And so it gave me some suggestions. I'm like, well, drill into that. That's interesting to me. And so I would use it for that, and that did help kind of hone in on some things I wanted to talk about, and it also eliminated some things I don't want to talk about that. So that was helpful to me. I haven't used it to generate like content. Like I again, as a writer,
Hmm.
as a developer, okay, I get it. I can help me generate some sample code. It can help me generate some sample data. It can explain things to me. As a writer, I'm still struggling with it because it just doesn't feel right to me yet. Same thing with image creation. Because I feel like there's
Hmm.
just something there that I'm just not comfortable with. Now, I will say the other night at work we had an event, and it was just a fun get together. And one of the people running it printed out pictures of our president and a couple other higher ups in the Ohio practice. And she's like, take these photos of them, go into ChatGPT or Bing Chat or whatever you're using, and describe them and see what it comes up with. So we took their picture and you know, middle age, white male, whatever. And then we would kind of hone in and just trying to make funny pictures of these people we work with. That was interesting to me, but it's still every time I see, do an image in the style of this artist bothers me. Write an article in the style of this author. I still struggle with a little bit, and I haven't quite honed in on why I'm so uncomfortable, other than I know that I know where the writing I do comes from, and like I don't know. I don't want to shortcut that creative process. I'm a huge fan of Stephen Pressfield, right? He's written the War of Art and just a bunch of books
Hmm.
like that. And I think of there's a process, right? You have your muse, and that's how things come out, right? Through your muse. And to me, my muse is not this Gen AI stuff where I'm going to say, here's this idea, spit out an essay on this thing, and I'm going to post it to my blog, right? It just seems weird to me. Um, but I know a lot of people that do. But we're also seeing, I think, especially on LinkedIn, we're seeing a lot of garbage articles pop up on LinkedIn where I think people, that's what they do. They go out and they say, write me, what are the 10 reasons you should use whatever technology? And it looks very much like it was generated. It doesn't feel like this person spent any time on it at all. And so that's my struggle as someone who writes, who likes to write. Um,
Hmm. No, I have very similar reservations too, especially when it comes to text. I think I wrote about this maybe 2-ish months ago on LinkedIn. I gave my solemn pledge that any text, any ASCII character that you see coming out of me is from me, no one else. I
on my
don't use
blog,
it for,
on my
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
blog, probably last year sometime, there was someone on Mastodon, which is pretty much the only social
Yeah.
network besides LinkedIn I'm on. they were talking about, hey, let's have a real seal that we can apply to things, right? And so that's at the
Mm.
bottom of all my posts. Like this was written by a human. Now, I mean, people can believe it or not, but that's so it's this little red, looks like the real milk seal, right? So,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know that the guys who were doing it have done anything more than generate just a paragraph of text that that link leads to. But you know, I want people to know that I'm not faking it. And so to your point, I mean, that to me is not a bad thing to say. I actually wrote this.
Mhm. No, no, I dig it. And when it comes to coding, I mean, I'm of two minds. This is sort of our chosen profession. We could have done anything. We could have baked bread for a living, but for some strange reason, for some unfortunate series of events, we find ourselves behind an IDE for, 40 hours a week. And you kind of alluded to it earlier, wishing that retirement would hit where you could be on maybe a beach somewhere or a mountain somewhere to, whatever your proclivities lie. The next
Mhm.
generation of programmers, this is something that they're going to have to grapple with. The the youngest and sort of like most vestigial form of generative AI that I could think of for coding was IntelliSense. I mean, it was released in like Visual Basic 5 or something like that. And we didn't scoff at it back then because we were always in the driver's seat. We would be typing and it would sort of learn from what we were doing, learn from our coding style, and then just recommend things to us. It wasn't authoritative, by any means. It was just like, oh, you want to call this method, oh, okay, this is what you do. And oh, by the way, here's the parameters that you pass into it. So I'm curious, in some of your conversations about like the next generation of programmers, is this something that people are worried about? Are they not going to develop the PTSD that comes along with being a true senior developer if they just, kind of
Well,
shortcut it a little bit?
yeah, well, so I wonder about that, right? So when I came up, internet was still young, right? So I started in 95 and really the internet was like the World Wide Web that we know was early 90s, right? So it wasn't long after that I started as a professional dev. If you wanted to know something, you'd go out and you'd buy a book, right? And you'd have these big books on how to do, Bill Vaughn's Hitchhiker's Guide to SQL Server and Visual Basic, right? Those types of books, or Dan Appleman's Win32 API guides that were, massive. Um, we had to me, there was some work that we had to do. It wasn't just obvious, but again, what we had to know was small compared, you know, 30 years ago to what we have to know now, right? Then it was like this, you could
Mhm.
go buy a book and know what you needed to know, right? You could read um Kernighan and Ritchie and know enough about C to go, right? Like you didn't need much more than that. Um, Now I think there's a lot there that there's more being expected of developers, right? The idea of the full stack and you to kind of know all these different pieces and how they fit together and the different frameworks that are coming out every week and these different database technologies. It's not just this anymore. Now you have to worry about these things and so I'm sure the developers of the 70s and 80s looked at those of us who came up in the 90s of like, oh, you guys have it easy, right? You at least have books, right? Like we did, we'd have to, I don't know, print out some manual, or all we had was the manual from the manufacturer, right? Or from the developer of the language we were using. Like I don't know. I'm sure that the old guys then were looking down at us going, yeah, you guys have it too easy. You guys have IDEs now, right? Um, and so I can't be too hard on this generation. I do I do think there's a risk, even for us who are still doing this, there's a risk of us losing some of those skills because now we're offloading it to something else. Now, the argument can be made, well, maybe that's okay. Those are things maybe we shouldn't have in our heads. We shouldn't just know how to do. Let's offload that. So uh, I would always say that people coming into this now should know the basics. They should know how to do this stuff without the help of Gen AI, but there's no stopping it. Like,
Mhm.
and if the tools are there, you may as well use the tools. I don't think we're going to stop that. I can't, shout at the shout at the sky and make it all stop, right? It's going to be like this is what we have to deal with now. And like I said, I mean, I've come around, I'm embracing it more. Um, there's more I want to understand about it. Uh, I want to get a deeper understanding of how it all works. I want to have it use my own data and build my own co-pilot type of things. I want to do that so I can have a better understanding because right now I think it still feels like a fair amount of magic. Like,
Hmm.
oh, hey, look, and I understand things like, tokenization and how it comes back and that kind of stuff. But, you know, the things that concern me are where the training data is coming from and, all that kind of stuff. But for the new people that are coming in, I mean, to me, if you're not embracing it, you're going to fall behind. And I don't want to be that grumpy old man saying, well, they should, you should have to fight the same fights I fought and go through the same difficulties I did because, you know, I mean, why, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah.
But like again, part of me wants to say that, right? Like, oh, you should have to do that. I only had books, I didn't have this. I didn't have Stack Overflow. But look at even things like Stack Overflow, right? When Stack Overflow hit, there's a whole generation of devs who were like, "Oh, that's where I went to learn how to do stuff," right? And you would see, and if you haven't seen it, I'd be surprised where developers who have gone and found the Stack Overflow answer, copied and pasted without understanding it, and it's in your code base now, right? Um, but we didn't like the world didn't collapse from that, right? We
Hmm.
got through it. It's okay. And I feel the same way here. I do think as the principals and staff engineers and the senior engineers now, like we do need to ensure that they understand, like, okay, you truly need to understand what what's being generated. You can't just assume that it's the correct answer because the number of times that if you've used it for any length of time, you get bad answers. So
Hmm.
tell me how to do this. Okay. And then you realize that's just wrong. And then you're like, no, 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 no. In a current version of the language, right? I think I read the other
Hmm.
day that the current models are, only up to .NET 8 or something, right? Or .NET 7. And so if you ask it a question of, hey, how can I do this? And you give us some hints about current technology, it's going to say, no, C# doesn't support that, or .NET doesn't support that.
Hmm.
So, um, so we do have to have a critical eye, and I think that's the one thing that if people are going to be doing this and using it more, they should understand how to think critically about what it's producing and is it is it correct? And if it's even if it is correct, is it what we want in our code base? You know what I mean? Like you can have correct and you can have, there's other pieces too, just having it be correct. Right? Is it
Hmm.
readable? Is it testable? Is it all those other things that we expect when people are writing code themselves? And I would say they should understand too that it really is just it's a helper, um, and we should use it that way.
Hmm.
But
Perfect way to sum up my thoughts too. There's no disagreement coming from this side of the Mississippi. So if people want to learn more about you, learn more about your work, kind of where can they go? I mean, you mentioned Mastodon and LinkedIn, are those the places that you frequent?
I've been on LinkedIn a lot more lately. Just that's where I'm publishing like my if I blog post, I go there first. I get better engagement than I do. I'm kind of off X. I have it's write only for me now, and I haven't even written
Mm,
anything on there in a couple months. But same stuff, different day.net is my website with my blog and everything that I've written, and that has an about page that has links to Mastodon and LinkedIn and GitHub. But I'm typically MJEATON everywhere, so that's
mhm.
kind of the username I've stuck with forever. So, but I'm on those places, and I'm more than happy to engage with people on LinkedIn if they have questions or anything. And same thing with if you dig deep enough, you'll find. I don't know if my email's out there now. I'm sure it is, but
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to entertain
You never know. I'm
questions.
sure someone has your email address
Oh, I'm sure,
somewhere.
sure,
Yeah. But no,
someday.
Michael, it was really good catching up with you again. I
Yeah,
appreciate your insights. I'm glad I'm not the only one that feels that way about many different aspects of this. So no, thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
no, thank you for having me. This was fun.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the future.